thing in your. Oh, there we go.
Ba-ba. Okay, now we're live. In fact, up here, I can see.
Woohoo!
I don't know if you guys can see it, but I can see a counter. I don't know what happened there, Paul. I think it's your fault. When you popped in, it just turned off the counter. I was like, wait, wait, wait.
Yeah,
Welcome
blame me. That's
everybody.
fine.
This is going to be a very interesting session tonight. This is going to be something a little bit different. We're going to be talking about show notes and what they are really. Well, I've got some other things I want to ask some of our panelists who are actually speakers for the Show Notes Summit, which will be taking place August 28th. I'll introduce each one of them here pretty quick. Just want to let you know, if you're going to be wanting to ask a question, if you want to post a comment, please give StreamYard, which is the service that we're using, give StreamYard permission to use your name and your picture. That way I can address you in person. And just like I'm going to address our speakers here in a second. So it's StreamYard.com/Facebook, StreamYard.com/Facebook. We're going to be talking about the Show Notes Summit here a little bit, which is at ShowNotesSummit.com. And these are two of our presenters here with me today. So hello. We're going to talk to Eliquity, which is to the right. Eliquity has been writing show notes for a little while, just a little while. And just tell us a little bit about your history with writing show notes.
Yeah, so thanks for having me on today, Steve. I'm super excited to chat with everybody and talk about show notes. So I started writing show notes almost 4 years ago for my show and other people's shows as well. And I write over 300 episodes of show notes in a year. So I've written over 1,200 episodes, and that's not actually counting my own personal podcasts as well. So I am definitely an expert in writing show notes. I can practically write them in my sleep. Practically. And so besides writing show notes, I also have a content writing business. So I write website content. I help people with ghostwriting their books. I also help people with other podcast content, such as like if they need a blog for their show or they need a newsletter. So I can do content for various different aspects of podcast production as well.
Sweet. All right. And then down below, we have Mr. Paul Stennett. Good evening. It's evening for you too, I guess.
Yeah, it is. It is evening for me. Yeah, it's night.
I have to ask.
It's very bright over by Eliquity's place. That's interesting.
I have to ask because you're in a completely different country, but you're not too far off from my time zone, right? You're in Jamaica.
Yeah, I'm in Jamaica. It's 7:30 here for me. I'm assuming. What time is that for you? Like
it's the same for me.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, same time zone.
So Eliquity is actually farther than any of us because she's like 2 hours behind us. So
I'm 1 hour okay. behind you guys.
Yeah. I was going to say, Paul and I are in the same time zone, so we must be closer than you. Paul, how long have you been writing show notes for other people, for yourself? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I started off writing show notes for my own show, and then I started writing for other people, my client show notes, and so I've done the whole gamut from website copy, social media captions as well, also YouTube descriptions, and having to optimize for YouTube video views and YouTube algorithm and all that stuff. So yeah, I've definitely run the whole gamut. And how I like to write show notes is I want to give as much detail on the page so people who come on and are not listeners can get value, but I also want to leave some of a little bit there for people to create FOMO, for people to want to listen to the episode. So I tend to go more value, a more upfront content on the blog post or on the show notes page than opting to have maximum amounts of FOMO on the show notes page. That's just how I write.
Now, Paul, you said on the page, which doesn't make me think of this.
Right.
My smartphone when I'm listening on an app. So when I say show notes, and that's really the main reason for tonight, is to talk about what are show notes really. Paul, then you're saying the show notes are where am I going to find the show notes that you write? Where do you think I'm going to find them?
So I say show notes are multiple places, right? So the show notes are wherever people are going to find out information about your show. So if it's in Apple, if they scroll down, that's what you consider show notes. If they're finding your show on your website, below the play section of your we can play the episode. If you have a little drop, if you have a little embed there, below that area is where you're going to find the show notes. So wherever people are able to listen to your show, the content on the show, I call show notes.
And is that the same in both places?
Depends. So like Liquid said, you might have longer, shorter show notes in Apple. So I tend to write the full show notes as much as I think I need to write on the page, and then I take an excerpt of that and then put that in like the Apple specific. If I use Libsyn, and Libsyn you can give specific descriptions for each episode for Apple specifically. So I put that in that section there for Apple, and everywhere else is the full thing.
Okay. And what Paul was referring to is we had a false start for some reason, and we didn't go live when I thought we went live.
Oh,
and the Liquidy
yeah,
actually
yeah.
explained what she said show notes were. So Paul's saying it can be different in a couple different places. And Liquidy, you've got a couple definitions for show notes. So tell us what you think show notes are.
So when I write show notes, for me, show notes are basically like a summary of your show. But when I write them, I like to do a little bit of storytelling in them, and also really hook the reader in/listener to want to listen to the podcast episode. So you want to hit on the main points of the show, but you don't want to tell the whole story, and you don't want to give away like a ton of the information. You just want to let them know what they're going to learn, what's the point, why would they want to listen, and definitely put like a little bit of story. I usually like to throw a couple quotes in there, especially if it's an interview, to kind of like give a little flavor to the show notes, to see like where it's going and what the kind of the style is of the person that they're interviewing, things like that. So I like to make it a little bit stylized, but definitely hit the main points, but not tell the whole story in the show notes. Because if you tell the whole story in the show notes, then they're just going to read the show notes and probably not going to listen to the episode. But either way, another way you can do it too, like Paul was saying, is that you can write a whole long description first, and I like to use that as my blog post, and then you can shorten that description up to make that into show notes as well, and repurposing. And so that's another way you take your audio format, make it into a blog, and then make it into show notes. The show notes should not be a transcription, and it should not be a blog post.
Sounds like you're putting your foot down there. Oh, Susie from Hampshire, UK.
Susie.
She's in the same time zone as Kareem, who just a couple minutes before said he was up in North Africa. Wow.
Wow.
Got Spokane, Washington. Hey, Robert, good to see you. Somebody here from Jamaica. They didn't give their permission to StreamYard, but who could that be, Paul? Who else is up? Yeah, Brian Insminger's in the house. Yeah, so there's a real problem in the space that says show notes should be this or show notes should be that, or I think more than likely, people don't really know. They don't really understand what show notes are. And this is not going to be the deciding factor on what show notes are. The reason for this live stream was to expose the fact that there's a lot of confusion out there. I like all the descriptions that you guys have given, because I do think that for me, I like a short description in the apps on the smartphones, and then I like a longer, full-featured article almost on a website, because that's going to give me the Google traffic and the organic search. So I think both are show notes, but then again, I could be way wrong. And I've flip-flopped like John Kerry on this. Raise your hand if you know who John Kerry was. You're over 40. Yeah, you're over 40. Good.
I'm not over 40, but okay.
Oh, well, wow. You're well educated.
Paul's an old soul.
There you go.
Yeah.
And I was going to have somebody else pop in here too as well. But Liquidy, you said something very interesting, which was taking the long form content and boiling it down to a shorter thing, which is actually what your session is going to be at the Show Notes Summit. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so on the Show Notes Summit, what I am going to be explaining the process of is how I take a long form content like transcripts or a blog and take that and turn that into show notes. Because as a writer, one of the hardest things to do, and this kind of sounds weird, but if you write all the time, you get this. One of the hardest things to do is to take long content and shorten it down into much shorter content, and having it all make sense and still keeping the main idea of the whole content that you're writing. So it's really important that you understand what the main point is that you're writing about, and also what are the most critical details you need to add in when you're shortening your blog post or your transcription into a shorter format of content, for sure.
Brian says he agrees with us. It's extra work, but I prefer a different in-app experience from the blog post and website. And Liquidy, you know that there's actually restrictions within apps to display as much as as much text as you want, but there's actually restrictions to that. What do you know?
The only thing that I know as far as in apps is the new Apple one is 4,000 characters. I'm not sure how many characters other apps will limit you to. But for me also, it's easier for me to do a shorter format because for me as a writer, I write between 2,000 and 6,000 words a day. So it's easier for me to just condense it down and make it short and then get on with my next show notes I need to do than to make it longer. So for me, it's a little bit easier. It's a little bit less time consuming, especially for my own personal podcast when I'm writing show notes, is just make it super brief with like subtitles. And also another thing you want to do for your show notes is make sure that you have at least one main keyword you're focusing around for your SEO, because that really helps Google draw up your show notes as opposed to maybe your competitor show notes.
Yeah, and we'll be having a session about SEO for podcasts show notes at the Show Notes Summit. I was going to ask you another question, Liquidy. Let me save it for later. Paul, now, how much of what you do, what do you do primarily? Because we know Liquidy, she's been doing the reps. She does, 2,000 to 6,000 words a day, but that's not what you do. So what do you do in your normal course of the day? What's your focus on, what kind of work do you do? I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, so primarily, me personally, because I have a company of two, me and my wife, and she does all of the production. I do all of the writing. She does writing as well. But primarily, my focus is on podcast growth. So that's working with clients who have shows that they want to grow, get clients from. I help them to grow the audience and also turn some of those audience into clients for them for their business.
Okay. And then what you're going to be doing for us at the Show Notes Summit is talking about not just writing show notes, but other things that show notes writers can do. I know in the Podcast Editors Club, I'm very, very hardcore on, we only talk about post-production. We don't talk about making the show. We talk about editing the recordings. We talk about the business side and make sure they wear their podcast editor hat. If they want to ask about Anchor and media hosts and microphones, they're wearing a podcaster hat. They're going to take off the podcaster hat, put on the podcast editor hat. So you don't put on a show notes writer hat all day long. You're going to be showing us some other things as well. Do you want to give us a teaser? Just a little teaser of what you're going to present?
Sure. Like what you said is exactly right. What I have learned or gathered is that all the podcast show notes writers are actually editors who also do podcast show notes writing, because they think that there's not enough value in and of itself to be fully show notes writers. So what I'm going to be showing people is these are huge potential and a lot of things that you can do to have a very successful career as someone who's solely into writing and show notes writing. So I'll be showing people all the different things that people can do to add value to yourself as a show notes writer, bring more value to your clients, and so you can focus entirely just on writing.
All right, I'm just going to give everybody a quick little a view of the other sessions that we're going to be having at the Show Notes Summit, and that is right here. This is shownotessummit.com, and this actually if I hit play, you'll see us right here. We're actually live on the website right now. Got 11 days until this thing. We've got Daniel Desir, who's going to be talking about how to write epic episode titles, which are totally related to show notes, I think. Because if you don't start with a good title that represents your show, that's the first thing people are going to see besides the actual show artwork. Daniel J. Lewis for Shortcuts to Better Show Notes. That's going to be more about AI. What kind of helpful things can you do to create show notes that are automated? April Weir is going to be talking about SEO for podcast show notes. Who doesn't need help with that? I mean, really. Yeah. Ashley Barnett, my friend Ashley, turning show notes into blog posts listeners will want to read. And if you read what Brian was saying earlier, he likes to have that longer blog post on the website because it's a better experience, and it's going to be for people who may not want to listen to a 60-minute episode. They might want to read, a nice article around that subject matter. She's going to give some good examples too. I've already seen her session that's been pre-recorded. Michelle Schulp is going to be talking about how to get the most out of Gutenberg. And that's going to be really good because I tell you what, a lot of people, we're still lost, and I'm including myself in that. We are still lost on, how to use Gutenberg blocks on websites. So if you're on a WordPress website, they changed WordPress 5.0 to include this Gutenberg thing, and she's going to show us how to get the most of it with using blocks and things like that. Here's the ever popular and talented Paul Stennett, who just talked about his session. And I like this description. It's likely you spin more plates than just show notes for your clients. Isn't that good? All right, and we've got Jacqueline Schiff. She's going to show us how to use Descript and transcriptions for show notes. Eliquity is here. She just told us what she's going to be doing. And that's it. So you can go to podcast show notes. I'm sorry, go to shownotessummit.com and you'll be able to see the 2 ticket options we've got there, which is a $9 watch it live or $49 watch it live and get all of the replays plus some bonus content, including a private Slack channel for people who want to learn how to write better, want to keep up to date on certain things. I mean, maybe Apple changes their parameters. Let's announce it in this private Slack group and help each other out. Where you're just like, no, don't change it again.
No, don't change anything anymore.
Yeah. I'm going to put up some more questions here in a bit, but I want to bring up here some more comments from the viewers. Facebook user, I think this might have been the person from Jamaica. I write the key points under subheadings. I go through my transcript and look at what was key, what I think people would be searching for, and more of a relaxed blog style. Very good. Susie, who's up at 1:30 in the morning, 1:50 in the morning almost. I'm interested in the idea of creating a blog post for my episodes, but I'm not sure how to go about it.
Come see my part.
Yep. And Ashley's, we're going to have a couple that are going to address that right off the bat. Mark's going to pose a question for us all. What are your views on podcast player descriptions containing the first paragraph of the website show notes? Podcast player description. Go ahead, Liquidy.
So if you have a podcast player that automatically pulls the top paragraph of your show notes, one of the things you want to make sure is that you don't have a common description of your podcast in the first paragraph. So like my show description, I used to have it at the top, but then I learned that some players will just pull that as your description. So then you end up having your show description as each episode description, and you don't want that to happen. So what you want to do in that case is you can put a short little brief, like listen in to find out and learn how to on your top paragraph. And then that way, if the app pulls your top paragraph from your show notes, it will automatically pull the information specific to that episode, not just your general show.
So I'm assuming you mean something like the like Pat Flynn's Fusebox player. Is that what we're talking about?
I haven't seen Pat Flynn's Fusebox player.
You've seen it. Let me find somebody who's got it. Hold on a minute. I'm sure I could pull it up. I'm pretty sure. I'll get an example here for you in a minute. Of course, I'm staring at a blank screen. Yes. Okay. Let me. I have to say it. Let me share my screen because you're supposed to announce it every single time you do it. So this is a client of mine, and he has the Fusebox player. And here we go. This episode. Here is the short description. And I can look at
that's
more over here.
automatically from the website?
Yes. Well, yes. This is coming from the website, and I can click on each one of these and see each one. And it's automatically playing. I don't know if you can hear that, but
and just for clarity, Steve, the Fusebox is a plugin for WordPress, correct?
Actually, Fusebox now works on all websites, not just WordPress. They just updated it earlier this year.
Awesome.
Nice.
Yeah. In fact, they have a free version, which is pretty generous. Let's see here. DR wants to ask if there will be any templates available throughout the summit. I don't know if anybody will. Liquidy, would you?
I could totally make a show notes template. Yes.
That'd be great. Just an outline, or well, don't tell us. Save it for the summit.
It's going to be a secret show notes template that will not be available and revealed until the show notes summit.
Fantastic. Susie's looking forward to it. Susie's a ticket holder. Thank you, Susie. So is Kareem. I know Kareem is, he's purchased a ticket. I don't know if I'm supposed to be telling anybody. Oh, there we go. It was her. Alex is awesome. Let's see. Craig, do show notes hyperlink to specific timestamps related to a specific topic subject? And should they? If you guys don't know the answer to this, I think I do.
I have an answer. Paul, do you want to go first? Do you have an opinion on this?
It depends. Like, if you're doing the point by point style show notes, then I see the benefit in doing that. Actually, I haven't had any experience with it, but I know that it's very powerful. So it does all it works really well on YouTube. I know it works really well when you're doing like transcription, like bullet points. Here's what happened, and having the timestamps along with that. I think those go well together. But I haven't had any experience with doing that for any of our clients.
So
Okay.
for me, as far as my user experience and me using other people's podcasts, I usually don't look at timestamps. I usually just put it on and listen to it. And timestamps, I feel like that content real estate is better used for SEO keywords than timestamps, because you're not necessarily going to be putting keywords in your timestamps. Plus, a lot of listeners aren't going to look for a specific line in your podcast, most likely. So for me, I feel like I agree with Paul. Like, it's really great on YouTube. YouTube, it works really well, but for show notes, I don't believe it's a benefit when you're writing show notes.
And I'll answer the everything but the last two words. The should they I'm not going to address, but do show note hyperlinks to specific timestamps related to do they? They can, and there's a couple plugins that allow you to do that. The Fusebox plugin that I just showed you, I don't know if it's all of them or just the premium one. That one does. The Simple Podcast Press plugin, which is only WordPress. That one, I've been using that for years on my old website for my old podcast. And that had, you put your timestamps. All you had to do is put it in brackets, put the time, and it automatically, once you posted the WordPress blog post on your website, had timestamps that would jump to it on the page. As far as inside of the apps, I think those are chapter markers, are different from what we're talking about in show notes, but I think that would be very similar in in-app experiences. Like I think Overcast does. I haven't tried it myself, but Overcast allows you to have chapter markers, and I think you have to set it up differently. But do they? Yes. Should they? It's like these two said. Who knows? All right.
I think if you have a more technical show that does a lot of explaining of things, it would probably be more useful.
And I would go as far as to say if they have a lot of segments. For instance, one show I added is the Stacking Benjamin Show, and it's basically a magazine style type of show. They'll start off reading some headlines and doing some news reports. Then they'll have an interview. Then they'll have Doug's Trivia, and people come for that. And then they have the listener voicemail, question and answer piece, a little bit of community building at the end. So they have some timestamp jumps for that, just to get people through the section, or at least they used to. I haven't checked recently actually to see if they're offering it and where they're offering it, but they had in the past. All right, let me ask a couple of other questions here. What do you guys like to use to assist you in writing show notes? What do you use?
Yeah. So I run. So after I get the episode MP3 file, I run it through Otter, Otter.ai, and I get the transcript for that, and then I use the transcript to help me to do the writing. I just do the writing in simple Google Docs with the Grammarly plugin, and from there I cut it up into different pieces that I need. Whether it's going to be for Apple descriptions or Instagram captions or all the other places I'm going to be putting it. So I start with the Google Doc and everything else goes from there. So yeah, Otter into Google Docs into Grammarly.
So mine actually depends on what I'm writing in what order. So if I'm doing a blog post and show notes, what I'll do is I'll take the transcription from Rev or Otter or wherever my client's providing the transcript, and then I will go through the transcript, create the blog post, and then take the blog post information and use that to make the show notes. And so that's how I do it if I'm doing blog posts to show notes. But if I'm just doing show notes, I will download the MP3. I use Hindenburg Pro for my editing, but I also use Hindenburg Pro when I'm writing show notes. And then I will usually put, if I'm doing a first two episodes for a client, I'll leave it at regular speed and play it. But once I get to know the client and get to know like their style, I usually jack it up to like 1.5 and just like rev on along and listen to it and then stop where I need to stop, type it out. And like Paul, high five Paul, use Google Drive and also Grammarly, because you always need a grammar checker for your, even if it's for your show notes, because incorrect grammar just looks unprofessional.
How about Evernote? Did either of you say Evernote? I think I missed.
I used to use Evernote, but I actually switched to Google Drive because with multiple clients, it was just easier to use Google Drive.
Okay.
Yeah, I find it as well.
And
It's a lot
we've
more
got,
accessible.
sorry, here's a question. Have any of the panel found or discovered the final word on show notes contribute significantly to SEO? Can you
Yeah.
prove it? How do you prove it?
So I have a way of my own personal proof with that is that on Google, you can actually do a Google, I think it's called a Google alert, where you can go on your Google account, create a Google alert, and then anytime those words come up, it will send you an email. And multiple times I have gotten emails on, because my podcast is Travel Gluten Free, I have gotten emails about, hey, this gluten-free thing was mentioned, and it was my show notes. So yes, SEO, show notes, keywords and SEO are super important if you want to be found on the internet, because a lot of times it will pull up, if you search for someone's show, it will pull up their show notes first before it'll pull up their website.
Paul?
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Definitely, show notes are good. And why I like show notes as well is if you blog posts for show notes is if I don't have any time, or if a client doesn't have any time to write blog posts for their show, blog posts just generally for their business, they can use the show notes as real blog posts. And how I write, it's meant to provide as much value to the reader as possible. In case they don't decide to listen, they can still read and get the value. That's a good source for getting backlinks. And backlinks, as you know, or if you don't know, are good drivers of SEO. So having people link back to your site saying, hey, this point that he made on or she made in this blog post, which is actually just a show notes, was very valuable. Let me link to it. Those backlinks work very well towards building SEO. So yeah, definitely good.
Yeah, and one thing I just want to add on to Paul's comment is that you just want to make sure that your if you're using your show notes for a blog post, which I've also told my clients that they can do if they don't have the time or money to do a separate blog post, is that you want to make sure your show notes are at least 300 words so that it is searchable by Google.
Now, Paul said something a minute ago, and I wanted to jump on it right there because he's right. He said, but then he's like, but maybe you don't know. And that's what the reason for this summit is because there is just not enough focus in the podcasting space on show notes. Whether you think it's the description on this thing or on a website and they're the same or different, it doesn't matter. There's no visibility. There's no people talking about this and teaching other people how to do this. The whole blogging space is forgotten in the podcasting world. If you've got a blogging background like I do, you see the power of the text. The text is where you're going to drive traffic to your site, and the site is where you're going to find the organic search results. You're going to get people coming to oh, look, there's a podcast. You're going to find more listeners there too than just if you're talking to the people who are already listening to you on the podcast app.
Yeah.
So I'm just fired up because this is something I think that just, there was not a single summit. There was not a single session at Podcast Movement about writing show notes. Not a single one. Nothing even close. Well, there was one close one. It was the guy from Laura Aaron Menke who did something about creative writing. And then there was another summit, which was supposed to be about podcast editing, which was not. It was about story editing. And I guess those are two related in some way because it's writing, but it's not show notes. So I'm fired up for the summit because this is something that just is not being addressed enough in the podcast space. And I might have missed something. I know that Danielle Desir, who I thought was going to be here tonight, and apparently she's not able to make it. She actually has a course on writing show notes. And I didn't know this until after I got her on the docket here for doing the summit with us. And I don't see hardly anybody else talking about it to that degree. They might talk about, 300 plus words, or, make sure you have a link to your website, or random things here. This is going to be a full-fledged 4-hour virtual summit. You're going to learn all kinds of things within a short period of time. We have tickets for $9 to watch live, $49 if you want to get the replays, access to replays for a full year, plus a private Slack group. And I've got some other ideas that I'm coming up with just because I'm all fired up about this right now because there's just not a focus on show notes. And look at that. We got
do my fire up dance.
All right, what else we got up here? I got a couple more comments here from the chat. Wondering the same thing also what contributes to more SEO, show notes, or full transcript. What do you guys think?
So I have heard that that actual show notes, original content, because, well, the transcript is original content, but I feel like that from what I've heard is that you writing show notes is better SEO than a transcript, because a transcript's going to have just a lot of words, but your show notes are going to have specific words that are summaries that are more pointed and focused towards your topic.
Yeah. Google is getting very smart, y'all. And so what they're looking for is if your blog post or your show notes answer the question that your users are searching for. So if you say, okay, how to tie my shoelaces, and you have a transcript about everything that you talk about, but not here's how you answer how you tie your shoelaces, you're gonna have a lower ranking. So that definitely having that curated content in the form of that blog post or those show notes is going to work better for you than having the transcript. If you can do both, do both. I usually just ignore transcripts whenever I look at people's blog posts anyway. So that's just I think.
More when it comes
ahead.
to content, more is not better.
Right.
Yes. And coming from a blogging background, I wasn't very good at it, but I can tell you there's certain things about a blog post that are more favorable to Google search, and that's having proper header tags. It's readability, keeping people on a site. You're going to have them probably read longer for a focused, targeted blog post than through a transcription of what was actually said that hopefully you've spent some time editing, because we don't talk like we write, and we don't write like we talk. And to read that word for word transcription just does not work well. Yeah, it's like
painful.
It's kind of sort of like it's kind of like all that stuff. Here's a question for Paul. Do you use Grammarly because of transcription AI comes up with the weird interpretations of the audio?
I use Grammarly to ensure that I'm speaking in the same language as the author, as the podcaster. So I have podcasters who speak the Queen's English. I have podcasters who speak Australian English. So I always switch between in Grammarly to find the one that I'm writing, so I can get all the spellings and everything correctly. Also, Grammarly is very good for me in helping me know what sentences are running too long, how I can change the context and change the meaning. So there's some basic stuff you can do with the free version, but definitely if your career is about show notes writing, definitely get a premium version, because it'll help you even more with context and all that sort of a thing, just to help it be more readable. So I'm not sure what you mean here about transcription AI comes up with weird interpretations of the audio.
I think what he means is that, are you using Grammarly because the AI doesn't correctly translate each word on the transcription?
Oh no, I'm not using. I'm only using the transcription if there's a quotable, if there's a part of what the podcast is saying that I want to get verbatim, instead of having to remember out of my head this is what they're saying and type it out, I can just go to the transcript, copy that sentence and put that back in verbatim. I don't start with the transcript and then type it down. So I'm basically listening and writing, pausing if I have something that I want to capture from the transcript, word for word, copying that out and putting that in. That makes sense.
Yes. And when I use Grammarly, I love Grammarly, and I have, like Paul, the ultimate paid version, because it's worth its weight in gold. And even if you're not a writer for a living, I think just having the paid version is a great idea, because it makes you look good because you're using excellent grammar. But I love using Grammarly because when I'm in creative mode, I process really fast and I just keep typing. And I don't grammar check as I'm going along. So I do basic grammar checking, but Grammarly is great because it allows me to just do my creative flow vibe and keep going without having to worry about going back and forgetting commas and places and things like that. So then I can take my work, throw it in Grammarly, double check it, and make sure everything is grammar checked correctly. So it gives me the freedom to just create and not have to worry about checking every little grammar piece as I'm going along.
We have a creative writer in the comments. Read this thing. Show notes are the golden bow tie of a podcast and craft a tapestry of undeniable detail that foster every single piece of authority there is.
Who are you, Facebook user? I need to be your friend.
That's poetry. Unbelievable. Okay, and Alexa. Sorry,
Alexandra.
you can tell I just turned off my echo. Especially for those of us with clients who are business owners, they can benefit from great show notes. And we're talking going back to, search results, bring in new people to the website, not through the app, for bringing in more leads versus having just their podcast by itself. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was just laughing at Mark Deal's comment about the Microsoft editor.
Oh, I haven't got there yet. There's a lot of chat going on here.
We'll get
totally
there a little
falling
bit.
behind.
Shout out to Mark Deal. Hi, Mark. I'm excited to share popcorn with you at She Podcast again this year.
Yes, popcorn and chips. Yes, I don't know where. I'm so far behind. I don't know.
Instead of Blair. I love it.
There you go. Oh, it's Helen. Hi, Helen, from New Zealand.
Wow.
Oh, here's Mark's comment. Can we all agree that Microsoft Editor browser plugin is horrible?
Yes, we can, Mark.
Yeah, Kareem's going to have the replay ticket because his internet keeps going on him. Here we go. DR is famous for the longest sentences on earth. Yes, please. When you're writing, here's a creative writing tip. When you're writing and you see the word "and" used more than twice in a sentence, break the sentence up. Simple. When you listen to a podcast and everything has been tied together with and then they talk about something else and they talk about something and. We're doing math in our heads. People don't realize you're doing math when you're using and making this really long sentence. Break it up. Break up the equation. And when you're writing, it's easier to do that. When you're speaking, it's just your normal way of speaking. So there's a tip
on
for
the
you.
flip side of that, don't use one-word sentences because most of one-words are not sentences anyway.
No? Question mark?
That one is.
All right. Oh, Mike Wilkerson just didn't give StreamYard his permission to. He's the poet.
Nice.
He's the poet and didn't know it, I think. Or maybe it was Helen. They're both not giving their. I don't know who made the comment, but I think it was probably Mike. So that's cool. All right. One more question. You guys, you're listening to the audio when you get the content. And then do you shut the audio off? Do you do something else? Do you use a tool? Do you put on music? What do you do as you're writing the rest of the, you're putting a polish on this big line of text or the short description? What are you doing? Tell me your, Liquid, go first. What are you doing?
So when I am writing from audio, I open up my Hindenburg Journalist because I absolutely love to edit in that as well. And I'll put the MP3 right in Hindenburg and I will put it on like fast play and listen along. And when I hear something I need to write down, I stop it and then go to because I have a Mac, so I always have like 4 screens up, go to my second screen where my podcast show notes are on my Google Drive and then write that up and then go back and then keep going and then hit the pause and then keep going. And then if I have to re-listen to it, I'll just scrub backwards, re-listen to it, especially if it's a quote. I want to make sure I get that quote right and then type it in again and then go back and hit the space bar and keep going. And so I will stop it and write and stop and write. And I don't listen to music when I'm doing show notes because doing show notes and trying to listen to somebody's voice and listening to music is way too distracting for me. But I do listen to non-verbal music, which is not the really term for it. But I used to listen to acoustic music that does not have any words to it when I do writing, like ghostwriting, content writing, other types of content writing that's not podcast show notes writing, because that does help. But if I'm listening to a podcast show already, I can't listen to music on top of that when I'm writing.
So what I'm referring to, and I'll have Paul answer this now because you've pretty much given us the insight. What it sounds like a Liquidy does is she's always writing as she's listening, and she's kind of done at that point. Is there a point where you're looking through everything you've just written to make sure everything's fine? Do you listen to music? Do you have another app that you put up just to make sure you can focus? Do you turn off the internet and just look at what's on the screen? Is there anything different that you do once you've got the content there and you want to make sure that it's ready to go out?
Oh, was that question for me, Steve?
No, for Paul.
Okay, yeah. So for me, I listen in complete silence, and I listen to the episode, like whether it's 40 minutes, an hour, or whatever. I'm listening to the full episode, and I'm grabbing little beats as I go along, like little parts that help me to tell the story or get a story clear in my mind. And after I've listened to the whole episode, then I turn everything off. And I write everything out. And yeah, and as I just so I'll write from start to finish one go, the full show notes after listening to everything, and then I'll probably go back through it again with a second draft and make sure it's make sure when I say it out loud, it's coherent. I'm not just running on and on and on into sentences and everything. Add punctuations, add space and gaps in there so people can, so it's easier to read and stuff like that. So I go through, I write it once and I review it once or twice before I publish it.
I used to do the same thing as a Liquidy. I would have what we would call instrumental music, but it was trance music, where there might be a chorus, but there's not really, heavy lyrics. And the reason for that is A, I love the music, and B, that stuff just gets you pumped up. So I'm like, yes, 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 as I'm typing. But I've learned of some tools that will help you to focus, and that's what I was trying to get at here, which is there's some tools that I've learned about him. I'm using one right now called Rescue Time. It's more of a time tracker. It tracks what your activities are on your computer. It can tell you how long you worked on a certain project, how much time you spent on distracting versus focused tasks or productive tasks. And there's a feature where you can turn off the internet for 30 minutes. Meaning you can only get to a certain website, or you can allow certain websites to get through, or it just shuts it off completely, and that forces you to focus. You can override that too, but then that you're cheating. It's like you're cheating on your diet. Then other things are OmniWriter. That was a cool one I used for a while, and that kind of turns your whole screen white, and it might play some soft music in the background, but then you're not distracted by Facebook, bing, coming up on you. Freedom.to is something that I just heard from, who was it? Somebody told me about this just recently. I was going to give them credit for it because it sounded like a really cool app. And then my daughter uses something called lifeat.io, which I thought was very cool. And that's more like background video, pretty sites and stuff like that. I don't know if that's much of a focus, turn off everything and focus type thing, but it's kind of neat. So there was Rescue Time, which is more of a time tracker. You can block off the internet so you can focus on what you've got right in front of you, which could be when you're pulling the audio off the show too. It doesn't matter. OmniWriter turns the screen white, plays a little soft music while you're just focused on the text on the screen. Freedom.to and lifeat.io. Those are a couple things. Here we got another comment. I often make the skeleton. Okay, this is definitely Mike. This is Mike Wilkerson. Skeletons instead of outlines. I often make the skeleton, which is an outline for the show notes, super show notes, and then listen to the program to nab pieces, parts while scribing the actual posting.
Yeah, I think that's how my wife does it. But for me, like, I have to have the whole episode in my brain so I can find the through line for the episode. Like if I don't have the how I get into the story of the episode, then I'm probably gonna have to go back to this whole episode again. This is my crazy process. Like I feel like when I actually start to write, I have to know how I'm gonna enter the conversation about the show and what's the through line that's gonna carry me all the way through to the end. And I have that all stored in my brain before I even start to write in the first place. And I'm not just writing pieces as I go along. I need to do a whole one push for everything. It's weird and stressful, but that's how it works. And
the cool thing is like there's no right way to write show, right? Like you can do it your way. Like I could never do it your way, Paul. I would lose half the information in my head, and vice versa, I'm sure. But it doesn't matter because we're both awesome writers, and we just have our own different style of writing. So that's one thing I get a lot from my ghostwriting clients. So is the way I'm writing correct? I'm like, well, unless you're completely getting distracted and running out every 5 minutes, then pretty much no. Like if you can sit down for an hour and just write, or half an hour, that's really great. And I just because Paul and I probably have more of a longer what's the word I'm looking for? Oh my gosh, I'm a writer and I'm losing words. It's way too late in the day. My brain's just not making words right now. Anyway, we can have more of a resilience to just write longer because we do it all the time. And so that's one of the things that once you start practicing writing more and more often, you have a resilience to write longer. You can sit down longer and be less distracted. And it's always good to take notifications off your computer. The only one I leave on are for meetings because I get so involved in writing, I completely forget. And I think I've done this to you, Steve. I completely forget about a meeting time. And then I'm like, I just left somebody ghosted by accident. So
I don't think that was me. Thank goodness.
Okay, good.
So again, this is the show notes summit, which we will be doing on the 28th. Paul and Liquidity will be two of our speakers. Go to shownotessummit.com, grab your ticket here. You'll also be able to see a couple options down below. We've got 11 days till the thing. Here's our speakers and the sessions in a brief description, just written like a teaser for a show notes page, written there for you to get a sense of what the segment or the session will be about. And then here's the prices: $9 to attend live on August 28th. You have until the 27th to buy the ticket. And then on if you want to get the replays, it's $49. And you will have access to the replays for a year. You will also have access to a private Slack group for people who write show notes for other people. And if you just want to learn for yourself, that's fine too, because maybe someday you'll be writing show notes for other people as well. And then after August 27th, it becomes $99, period. And that's going to be the day of the event and everything after. So what else have we got? I can't tell if we've got anything else. Oh, let's stop sharing that. Woo!
It's the crazy mirror in the fun house.
So let's see. I think we've got a couple more comments. Susie says I'm going to have to leave now. Oh,
I'm excited to see Susie at the show notes summit.
yep.
Yep.
And then we've got, so glad I saw the video. I purchased the playback option. Excited to learn more about show notes. Helen from New Zealand.
Yay, got one.
Yeah, the only problem with only offering a live ticket for $9 and then having the replay is people who are out of the country and they're on a different time zone kind of have to, staying up until 2 a.m. to watch a 4-hour summit is kind of tough. I get that.
Yeah.
I get that. Liquidity, thank you for being here. Tell people how they can find you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me, Steve. So if you would like to find me, you can check out my website, which is right here, rightforyou.me. And if you would like to find me on my podcast, you can search up Travel Gluten Free. Not only do I talk about gluten-free stuff, but I also talk about really awesome travel places to go to. So if you just generally like to travel, I've got episodes that are all about travel. And I also have another podcast that I have out. It's called COVID Travel Update. And that gives you all the latest information on what to do and what not to do when you're traveling with COVID. Not with COVID like you have it. You don't want to travel if you have COVID. But like traveling during the pandemic.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that. Paul, how about you?
Yeah, so you can find me at Listeners to Clients on Instagram, and that's my website as well, listeners2clients.com. And there I post about podcasting, growing your podcast, and growing your business as well as your podcast. And I'm excited to talk to you guys about how you can add more value to your show notes writing on the Show Notes Summit.
Yeah, I think your session is going to be very, very valuable. Just trying to figure out what else can I offer for money? What can I upcharge for? How can I give my clients more value through services? I was just talking to a client earlier today who's like, you've been doing this one show for us for 5 years. Now I want you to do this one when I launch at the end of the year. And I've got this other one and we want to do video and I need a show notes writer. I'm like, I'm not the jack of all trades, but people who watch this summit on August 28th, they're going to have all the information they need to be able to write decent podcast show notes. Yeah. Shownotessummit.com. Kareem says, interesting stuff. Looking forward to learning more. Yes. I think we've already caught up with everything else. Thank you guys for sticking around. Thank you guys for watching if you're watching the replay, thank you for sticking around to the end of the replay. But those who watch live, like Kareem, Susie, Mark's here, Alex here, of course. I think she was required by contract. Is that the relationship contract? Like,
Just being super supportive.
Sheldon Cooper has with Amy Farrah Fowler, all that stuff.
Brian, Diane.
Yeah, Robert. VG is here. Excuse me, I had a cough. I should hit the cough button. Thank you all for coming. And we're going to see you guys on the 28th at the shownotessummit.com.
All right. Take care.
Bye.